the stuff that we didn't finish Monday. Okay, so you guys should have this handout. It's the handout that we left off on Monday. So it has to do with metaphor and scientific writing, right? Metaphor and scientific writing. And we were talking on Monday about the use of metaphors in articles that are related to cancer, right? So we look at so many examples and we see maybe 3 or 4 metaphors that are in use in these articles, okay? Now we'll continue with, today we'll continue with this handout, and also I'll give you a new handout that will contain the information about our midterm exam next week, okay? So where did we leave off? We leave off at number 16, right? Number 16. So from 8 to 15, we say that cancer or dealing with cancer is war, right? So number 16, if you had a chance to look at number 16 at home, we have 16 as protein which puts cancer cells into hibernation, right? So 16, protein which puts cancer cells into hibernation, right? So hibernation is a word that you use especially with animals, right? That it goes to sleep and so on, right? It rests. So in this case, again, this is the metaphorical expression that we borrow from the source concept, right? Which is when we talk about animals. So maybe cancer cells are like animals, okay? Cancer cells are animals, okay? That can go into sleep, right? When the condition is not good for them, like in the winter, for example, right? So animals will hide and then try to save their energy and so on, okay? Number 17, doctors now hope to do large-scale studies of the drug's impact earlier in the disease's progression to see whether it will catch the cancer before it reaches more dire stages, right? Like dire meaning serious, right? So in this case, we have the expression catch, right? We'll catch the cancer. Can we really catch? We cannot, right? So we borrow that from other domains. And especially if we link 17 to 16, then we can view cancer cells as animals again, right? So like we can catch animals when they are asleep and so on, right? So in 17, the metaphor is still the same. Cancer cells are like animals, okay? Number 18, 3D technique, meaning 3-dimension, right? 3-dimensional technique. Boost hunt for breast cancer, right? Boost hunt for breast cancer. So hunt here again is the metaphorical expression that we borrow from the domain of animal hunting, right? So in this case, again, cancer cells are animals, okay? So from 16 to 18, you see that there's that metaphor of cancer cells are animals, okay? From 19 to 25, you can group 19 to 25 under the same metaphor, okay? Number 19, Ronald Hay lead a team of researchers to crack the mystery by watching the behavior of the cancer compounds in animal cells. So crack the mystery, right? Crack the mystery. So that's a metaphorical expression that the writer borrowed, okay? And number 20, let's go through each. Height genes may provide clues to cure for cancer. Clues, right? Number 21, researchers looking at the scans flagged up 259 suspicious looking findings for additional tests. Suspicious looking, right? Number 22, a very small population, only 1% of leukemia cells. Leukemia meaning like white blood cells, okay? Leuke means white, okay? Dark is mela, M-E-L-A, mela, melanin, melanocyte, and so on. Mela is dark, so leuke is white. Okay? Mela is like when you have melanin, you have pigments. You have a lot of pigmentation on your face, on your skin, and so on. So for this one, that turned out to be the ringleaders. Ringleaders, that's the metaphorical expression. Okay? Ringleader, do you know what it means? It means a leader of a gang, for example. especially illegal gang, like the leader of a gangster, illegal gangster, and so on. Okay. Number 23, how our genes and environment conspire to cause cancer. Conspire, right? Conspire is to think together, to plot something bad, to plot out a bad plan. Okay, so conspire. But actually, genes and environment cannot conspire, right? Cannot think together. So that's the metaphorical expression. Number 24, scientists have unraveled the paradox of how a carcinogenic poison can also act as a treatment for cancer. Carcinogenic means cancer-causing. Okay? Gen means to cause. Generate, for example. Okay? Carcino means cancer. So unravel, that's the metaphorical expression. Unravel means to solve the problem, to crack the problem, to separate, and so on. Okay? Number 25, the scientists also believe that the techniques used will help them unravel other cancers. Unravel, again, it means to solve the problem, to answer the question, and so on. Okay? So once you identify all the metaphorical expressions, you can see that 20 to 25 work under the same metaphor, which is cancer treatment or cancer research is like the enigma. You know the word enigma? Enigma. Enigma is like a puzzle. Cancer fighting or cancer treatment is like an enigma. Enigma in a detective story, that sort of thing. Because you have to crack the puzzle, you have to answer the question, you have to do some kind of detective work, and so on. Okay? So all in all, to summarize here, we have so many metaphors, right? Cancer cells are like human beings, cancer cells are like animals, cancer cells are like machine war, and so on, right? And fighting with cancer is like fighting in a war, and so on, right? So you can see that when we talk about cancer, there's not only one metaphor, but many metaphors, right, that we use in order to understand cancer, right? And we see from all the metaphors used here that to deal with cancer is a hard job, right? And we understand it as a hard job because of all the metaphors, right? Because it's like the enigma in a detective story, because it's like an animal that you want to catch, because it's like human being, because it's like being involved in a war. So now you understand that treating cancer is difficult, but you only understand that through metaphors here. So that's why I say that metaphors are influential, because they can help or they can influence your understanding of whatever it is that is being talked about. Okay? So for our class, we started out in the beginning of the semester. We started out with point of view, right? We study the fact that you can use linguistic expressions to express many types of point of view, right? Including spatial, temporal, ideological, and so on, right? And we'll go into details in a minute. So that's the first part. So we started out with point of view. So we'll have that on the exam. And then we moved on to transitivity analysis, right? And in transitivity analysis, we look at transitivity patterns, right? Material process, mental process, verbal process, and so on, right? And there's a topic in transitivity patterns that deals with what we call incongruent patterns, right? Patterns that are not basic, patterns that we are not normally expect, right? And then we talk about nominalization. So there's that part on the exam too. And also, we will do transitivity analysis, okay? And we'll do the metaphor too. So these are the topics that you will be responsible for on the midterm exam, okay? And the last 2 pages of the handout, there is an article about cancer treatment. There's that article about cancer treatment, and it's quite a long article. That will be on the exam. That very passage, that very story will be on the exam. So you can prepare for the exam at home studying over the weekend or on Monday, and it's this very story that will be on the exam. So I'll have you identify metaphors and discuss the use of metaphors in this article. Okay? So to me, when we take exams, it's an opportunity for you to study, right? Because I know that when we don't have exams, you don't really study, right? Maybe you have, you do other things, right? So if it gives you the opportunity to study, then I'll just give it for free, like here. So you don't come into the exam room without seeing the material, so you can study this before the exam. Okay? Let's see. So, and it's also related to the cancer metaphors that we just studied too. Okay? Now, let's start out with point of view. Okay, let's start out with point of view. So I typically I will have an extract from a novel or from any kind of text, and then I'll have you identify different point of view and discuss different points of view that are expressed in the text. Okay? When we talk about point of view, right? Point of view refers to the way in which we express our opinion about something, right? And there are many types of point of view. For example, spatial point of view. Spatial has to do with space or location. Okay? So there are words or expressions that will indicate the location of the speaker or the location of the storyteller in the story. Okay? So that has to do with the location. So you should be able to identify expressions that give you signal that indicate the location of the speaker or of the writer or the narrator in the passage. Okay? And then the temporal point of view has to do with time, right? Tempo has to do with time. So there are expressions like maybe tenses that have to do with time. So you should be able to locate and discuss what time it is and so on. And then ideological has to do with belief. So what's the belief of the writer? What's the belief of the character in the novel and so on. Okay? So we'll start out with point of view today. And this is a short passage, only consisting of 6 or 7 lines or so. Okay? It's from a novel by McEwan, okay? Amsterdam. Now, if you look at the passage here, it starts out with, she stared down at the group. She stared down at the group. When you read she stared down, you know right away that she has to be in a higher position than the group, right? Because there is that, preposition down, right? So that's one of the spatial expressions, right? Because it's an expression that has to do with location. So her position of that person, she, whoever it is higher than the position of the group, okay? Because stare down, right? At the group. There were 9 of them now. Now is a temporal expression, right? But does it mean the time that you are reading the book or the novel? No, right? Now is like the time that she was thinking at, okay? With control fascination. The man had collapsed his extendable pole and had rested it against the railings. So he's like de-assembling maybe the table or whatever. One of the others was bringing a tray of coffees from the takeaway shop on Horse Ferry Road. When you look at the expression bringing a tray of coffees, so bring tells you about the location, right, of the man and of the she here, right? Bring suggests the movement towards the speaker or the listener. But the opposite is to take, right? Take is away from, but bring is like towards, coming towards the speaker or the listener, right? So towards the she there, okay? So that's one of the spatial, right, expressions. And where are we? What could they ever hope to get that they didn't already have? And so early in the morning, what sort of satisfaction could they have from this kind of work? And why was it they looked so alike, these doorsteppers, as though drawn from one tiny gene puddle of humanity. So all the rest here might suggest some ideological point of view of the she, of this woman here, okay, of the narrator. She doesn't really have a high opinion or a positive opinion about these people that she's looking at, right? Because if you look at doorstepper, for example, if you look at one tiny gene puddle of humanity, it's like to her, these people look alike. There's no differences between these people. And the use of the word doorstepper, you know doorstepper? It's like someone who likes to corner, to push people into corner in order to ask questions, like interviewers or news reporter. They like to follow like movie stars or pop stars, right? And ask them private questions. And so she doesn't think of these people highly, right? So these indicate her point of view about these people, okay? Why do they like to do this kind of job, she's asking, right? And they all look alike and so on. So she doesn't have a high opinion of these people. So now you understand how to indicate, how to locate different point of view expressions, right? So for spatial expressions, we have things like stare down at the group and bringing a tray of coffees and so on, right? So these indicate her position as being higher than the people that she's looking at. And for the temporal, everything is in the past tense, right? Everything is in the past tense. But here it's interesting that in the second sentence or so, there were 9 of them now. So now here, we don't usually use now with the past tense, right? Now is like the present moment, right? So this now indicates that it's her thinking. It's her thinking. If you compare the first sentence, she stared down at the group and there were 9 of them now. So the first one is like the writer, right, is narrating. The writer of this novel is telling you what she was doing. But in the second one, it's like you go into her head already. So the now here like helps to signal the kind of the transition between the third person point of view and the kind of first person point of view that's in her head, okay? And then starting with question here, the question, what could they ever hope to get that they didn't already have? That again, that question signals to you that now you are in her head. So this is her thinking, okay? It's the question that she has. That question is a question that she's having in her head at that moment, okay? So you can see that there's a mix between like third person, she stared down at the group. The writer is describing what's happening, and a mix between that and what's happening in her head, okay? Starting with what until the end. So all the questions are things that are happening in her head, okay? Finally, the ideological point of view. So you know that she doesn't have a high opinion of these people because she calls them doorstepper, and she thinks of them as looking alike. She doesn't appreciate the differences in terms of their looks and stuff, okay? So that's how you do it. So first, when you do point of view, you should be able to identify different linguistic expressions that give you signal to the time, to the location, and to your belief or your opinion, and so on. And then you can describe, okay? So that's the first part, which is not difficult. Now, on to the second part, which is incongruent transitivity patterns and nominalization. When we talk about transitivity patterns, we talk about the typical, right? We talk about what's typical and what's not typical when we write or when we say things, right? Typically, when we say things, we would have 3 things. We should have participants, we should have the event, and we should have the details, okay? When we say or when we write things, we usually have 3 things involved, okay? Participants, in other words, who are involved, right? The event itself and the details. That's how we communicate, right? We have to indicate participants, the event itself, what happened, right? So the event refers to what happens, and the details like where, when, why, and so on. And then this is who might be involved. Right? So participant, the event, and the details, right? So who, not who, but when, maybe where, and why, and so on, right? And the event is like the action, what happened, and then participant, who might be involved. The typical or the basic sentence structure should be the participants are realized or are written using noun phrases, right? Noun phrases like the boy with a big hat, the boy in the red shirt, and so on, right? So that's typical. The participants will be realized by noun phrases, right? The boy in the big shirt, and so on, right? And the event will be realized as the verb, right? Or the process, right? The mental process, the material process, the verbal process, and so on. And the details, what about the details? The details will be realized or will be written as circumstances. Remember the term? Circumstances. Using prepositional phrases or adverb phrases, right? For example, in the morning, prepositional phrases or adverb phrases. In the morning, at noon, or under the table, whatever. So these are details, right? So that's typical. You have the participants in the form of noun phrases, you have events in the form of verb phrases, you have the details in the form of prepositional phrases or adverb phrases, okay? That's typical. But you could, stylistically, you could change the pattern to something that's more complicated, okay? Now, when you do that, typically there is nominalization involved. So when you do that, you might have the event, you might have the verb as the participant, okay? So it involves some kind of manipulation of the structure, right? So the verb could be nominalized into noun phrases, okay? Like if you, let's say, the enemies destroy the city. The enemies destroy the city. That's basic, right? Enemies, participant, destroy the verb, the material process, the city is the goal, another participant, right? And so, but you could complicate that and make it into an incongruent pattern, and you can say the destruction of the city came on Monday, whatever. The destruction of the city, right? So destruction from verb into a noun, right? So, and when you do that, several things happen. Some shade of meaning are lost. Like you don't know who destroyed the city because the destruction of the city came on Monday. You don't know who destroyed the city and so on. So you can obscure, you can take out the agent and so on when you do nominalization. So the purpose of studying this is for you to be able to look at whether or not the responsibility or the agent can be deleted, and also it will help you to unpack some hard to understand structures, okay? So I will usually take examples from news because news show a lot of nominalization techniques and also incongruent patterns. So if you look at number 1, this, North Korea's low-tech drones pose new military threat, okay? North Korea's low-tech drones pose new military threat. Now, you know drones, right? They are like airplanes, military airplanes, okay? So their airplanes pose new military threat. Now, our focus is, first we might have to locate the nominalized expression, which is here, new military threat, right? Because it comes from the verb to threaten, right? To threaten, right? So can you rewrite this? Rewrite especially the normalized expression and unpack the meaning of what it might mean, new military threat. So we can rewrite it as something like and we in rewriting it, we make it into a verb, right? The basic form. So we can do something like North Korea low-tech drones threatened, I don't know who, because I don't know, because it's not mentioned. Threaten who? The military? There's the word military. When you make the verb into a noun, you can modify it, right? Using any kind of adjective. You can say that it's old or it's new. You can say about anything about its size. And here, military modifies threat, right? As a noun. So threaten who? Maybe threaten the military of South Korea. Threaten people. Threaten who? I don't know. That's the intention that I want to present this. Because when you make something into a noun phrase, when you normalize things, when you have the incongruent pattern, some meaning is lost, right? Especially here, threaten who? Like the South Korean people, or threaten only the military of the South Korean, and so on, right? So that's why I leave it like that. Okay. Let's see. We can do number 2, and then I'll have you guys work together to do the rest. Number 2, I underlined the recent discovery of 3 drones, 3 airplanes, right? Presumably from North Korea, is drawing keen attention to the types of unmanned aerial vehicles. Unmanned meaning no human in control. So they are operated automatically, okay? Without any person controlling the airplanes. Unmanned aerial vehicles the communist state has, and their military capability, right? So I underline the normalized expressions here. So you see that the normalized expression, the recent discovery, right? It has to come from the verb discover, right? So, but now when it has become a participant, right? It has become a participant that can call attention, that can draw attention. So that's what is incongruent about it, right? Because now the event, the discovery can draw attention, can be the participant that works, right? So that's what is incongruent about it. So now we'll have to undo or unpack. And then the last one, their military capabilities. So capability comes from the adjective to be capable, right? To be capable of doing something, right? So we can unpack this. The recent discovery of 3 drones, presumably from North Korea, is drawing keen attention. Maybe just to put it back into the verb state, we can say 3 drones were discovered. 3 drones, presumably from North Korea, were discovered recently, like that. 3 drones, presumably from NK, North Korea, were discovered recently. So that's the more basic rendition, the more basic pattern, right? And I use the passive voice here, not necessarily because it's correct, but because I don't know who discovered these, like the military of the South Korea country or what, right? Or by people, just people that happen to pass by, who knows? So that's why I use the passive voice. You can do that for number 1 too, use the passive voice. Someone was threatened or whatever, right? Presumably from North Korea were discovered recently, right? And we did, and then what else do we do? And let's see. And we have drawing keen attention to, let's see, people. And I have the question mark here. People attended to. Attention comes from the verb attend to, right? To attend to. The types of unmanned and so on. Okay. So I have the question mark there because I don't know who attend to, meaning who might be interested in the discovery. I don't know. So I have the question mark here. People, South Korean people, or the military of South Korea. I don't know. So I have people or the military attended to the type of unmanned, unmanned aerial vehicle the communist state has, and and the level to which they are capable of doing whatever they are capable of doing in terms of military. What they are able to do, they are able to do in terms of the military. Okay? So this is how we will proceed. Okay? Again, there's no one correct version. Okay? This is not like this version is correct. You could do your own version, but what's important is you render or you turn the more complex clauses to more basic clauses. Especially turn the nominalized expressions into that basic verbal expressions, okay? Or adjectival expressions. Okay? Now, I'll give you about maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes to do the same thing and focus on whatever I underlined. Okay? So like number 3, for example, President Park Geun-hye on Monday blasted the South Korean military's inability to detect and block North Korean drones. So here, you see the noun inability, right? It comes from the verb phrase to be unable to be unable to, and so on, right? So you can render that into that more basic form, okay? Because of the normalization here, the news reporter can make it into like an entity or a thing. So she can blast meaning like criticize, right? So she can blast the inability, treating the inability, which is a state, right? To be unable to is like a state. So when it's turned into a noun or a noun phrase, it's like a thing, right? That she can blast, she can destroy, she can criticize. So that's why I said that, well, maybe by unpacking the information, the sentence would look different, okay, and more basic. So I'll have you do the same thing with the expressions or the questions that I underlined. Like her criticism came. Like the more basic form of criticism is the verb to criticize, right? And now when it's a noun, criticism is a noun, right? Nominalization. Now it can come, it can go, it can fly, whatever, right? So maybe when we unpack it into like she criticized, like that, it's not as vivid as her criticism came, and so on, okay? So I'll give you maybe 10 minutes to work on the underlying expressions, and then I'll walk around to help you if you have questions. In the original version, okay, it only says blasted the inability, right? So now inability has become the participant, right? So she blames the inability. She doesn't blame the military itself. She blames the military's inability. So that's why I said blame who, right? But we only learned from the original that she blamed the inability, but she doesn't really blame the South Korean military, even though we might guess that. In reality, we don't know. So that's why I said blame who or criticize who. Because, and then I have this as the circumstance, right? Because the SK military was not able to detect and block the drones and so on. Okay? So that's how I did it. And in the next one, next question, her criticism came. Here, criticize as a verb, right? And it has become a noun here. And when it has become a noun, it can be a participant. Like, it can be like a human being now. It can come, right? It came. But the more basic pattern is she criticized, like that. So you can see the difference between her criticism came and she criticized, right? So that's the purpose that I brought this up in this class, okay? So I'll give you more time for the rest. So I'll walk around again to help you. So in this one, the way I change it is Park criticize, I don't know who, because issue criticism. When you change criticize to criticism, you don't need an object, right? But when it's a verb like criticize, it usually needs an object, but we don't know who, right? So that's the point that I want to show in this class, that when you make something into a noun, the object is gone, the subject might be gone too, okay? So, or when you say the criticism came, the subject is gone. We don't know even who unless we look at the context and stuff and then do some guesswork. Pointing out meaning like saying that or arguing that and so on, same thing. So pointing out that citizens are becoming more concerned about security and so on. Okay? But even this version, I want to point out, even this version is not clear. What does it mean to be concerned about security? What does it mean? Like, because they are afraid that they would be hit by drones from North Korea, or what, right? So we don't know what security concern might mean. So that's what I want to point out, that when you make it into a noun phrase, the relationship between the modifier security and concern, the relationship is not really clear. What does it mean, security concern? Concern about security, I know. But what does it mean to be concerned about security, right? In the next one, political pundits, meaning people who know a lot about politics, said that Park Geun-hye felt the need to address the security fears, right? So we have two noun phrases here. We have felt the need, right? So to feel is to touch, right? And so on, right? So this makes it more like the material process. When you change need to a noun phrase, from a verb to a noun phrase, felt the need is like you touch the need, right? So it gives you a different feeling, right? The more basic version would be Park needed to address or Park wanted to address. The commanders named or defined this as the new security threat, right? So made that definition because the campaign threatened who in terms of security. And the word new, I don't know what it means. I know what it means, but I don't know what it's doing here. New meaning like, and the word new meaning again, or new meaning like never happened before. So that's why I didn't have that on there, because the relationship between that adjective and the noun phrase is never clear, right? New could mean 다시 한번, right? Like one more time. That happens again. That's new. Or it means it has never happened before, so it's new again, right? So questions? So if you are not sure about the participants, like who might be the subject and who might be the object, you can just say who plus question mark, because we don't know. And it's never told. Okay? Finally, in the last one, I don't think we have time to go through all the examples here, but in the last one, in the last question, I selected different headlines, newspapers headlines, that are about the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Yugoslavia back 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Okay, and so in this event, the embassy was bombed by NATO airplanes. Okay, and it resulted in 3 deaths and also a lot of injuries. Okay, so we would want to see how newspapers in 2 countries, including China, newspapers in China and newspapers in the US, report the event differently. Okay, and you can imagine that in China, the newspapers will have to blame, right? Will have to blame NATO for the bombing, right? Whereas in the they will have to lessen the blame as much as possible, right? Because they have to side with their country first, right? So this is what you can guess. And that should be evident in the transitivity patterns, right? So I selected different headlines from maybe in the period of 10 days from China Daily, which is an English newspaper in China. So can you analyze the pattern, like specifying what might be the participants and what might be the processes that are involved? And then can you make some comments about the patterns that you see? So, for example, in the first one, U.S. led NATO raid is condemned. Raid is like attack, right? So the U.S. led attack is condemned. So what process might that be? So we have the subject being the U.S. led NATO, right? So in this case, is condemn. Condemn meaning to express disapproval of, right? To curse, for example. So to curse, that's what process? It has to do with saying, right? So it's the verbal process, right? So the verbal process. Okay. And then the second one, people agonized by criminal act. People, and then that's the subject, right? Agonize, people were agonized, right? So agonize meaning feeling pain, feeling sad, right? Agonize. So in this case, feeling is what process? Mental, right? So it's the mental process. With the censor, people being the censor, right? Number 3, students continue protesting. We have students, right? And I said that when there are 2 verbs in a row, we can look at the last verb, right? Protesting. So protest is like maybe a material process. So we have the actor and the material process, like that. Okay? So you can do the rest. Nations condemn bombing of embassy. So we have nations being condemn being a verb, right? And it has to do with saying. So it's the verbal process. So verbal, and then nations would be the sayer, right? The person who says, and so on. Okay? And the next one, we have China and Russia condemn raid. Same thing, right? China and Russia being sayers, right? And condemn is the verbal process. And raid is the target and stuff. Okay? And then official, thanks Yugoslavs for assistance. Official being the sayer. Thanks is like speaking, right? So that's the verbal again. So you can do that until the last one.